Have you ever spent weeks, months, or even years fighting to fix something deep inside yourself, only to reach the other side and feel completely, shockingly empty? We spend so much energy trying to mend our broken places, working through past hurts, analyzing our choices, and untangling heavy emotions. We build up this expectation that once the hard work of healing is finally done, a grand moment of clarity will arrive. We assume we will instantly feel light, overjoyed, and complete, as if a switch flipped and turned all the darkness into gold. But instead, a strange, heavy silence settles over your life. You sit alone in your room, look around at the quiet walls, and realize that the chaos you fought so hard against is finally gone. Yet the silence that replaced it doesn't feel like a celebration. It feels heavy. It feels almost hollow. You look down at your hands and realize you are no longer holding on to the pain, but you aren't holding on to anything new yet, either. When you spend a long time in survival mode, your mind and body get used to the noise. You get accustomed to the constant adrenaline, the internal debates, the endless searching for answers, and the daily effort to keep your head above water. Your inner world becomes a bustling construction site of emotional repair. So when the heavy lifting slows down and the debris is cleared away, the sudden stillness can feel less like a victory and more like an echo chamber. You miss the familiar rhythm of your own survival, even if that rhythm was exhausting. You might even catch yourself wondering why you don't feel happy yet, or if you somehow did the healing process wrong, because you aren't overflowing with joy. If you are sitting with that hollow, unfamiliar feeling right now, I want you to take a slow, deep breath and pause. I want you to leave a comment below with this simple affirmation: I am allowed to be quiet as I rebuild. Type those words out and let them sink into your heart. Let that sentence remind you that feeling still, quiet, or empty isn't a sign of failure. It is simply the neutral, sacred space where your new life begins. When a storm passes through a forest, the air immediately afterward isn't filled with immediate, blooming flowers. It is filled with a stillness where the dust settles and the earth catches its breath. You are in that exact pause right now. You aren't broken just because you feel quiet. You are simply resting in the clean slate you fought so hard to create. For a very long time, survival was not just something you did occasionally. It was your entire daily routine. You grew so accustomed to holding your breath, bracing your shoulders, and scanning every room you walked into for potential problems. You carried a heavy, invisible backpack full of old worries, past betrayals, and deep-seated fears everywhere you went. Pain was not just a passing emotion that visited you on hard days. It gradually became the fundamental lens through which you viewed every interaction, every relationship, every conversation, and every choice you had to make. Without even realizing it, that pain gave you a sense of purpose. It gave you something to fight against, something to protect yourself from, and a clear directive for how to navigate the world. Your main goal every single morning was simply making it through to the end of the day without getting hurt again. Navigating life through the lens of past hurt meant you always knew what to expect. You expected disappointment. You expected conflict. And you expected to be the one who had to fix things. It was an exhausting way to live, but it was predictable. It was a familiar terrain. Then, through immense courage and effort, you started to heal. You slowly unbuckled that heavy backpack and finally set it down on the ground. Your shoulders suddenly feel lighter, and the constant physical tension in your chest begins to fade. But as you stand up straight and look down, you realize your hands feel completely, unnervingly empty. You look at the open road ahead of you without the constant presence of an emergency. And for the very first time, a strange wave of panic hits you. You do not know which way to walk. You do not know how to make decisions based on peace instead of self-protection. Your old map, the one forged out of hypervigilance, defensive walls, and survival instincts, is no longer useful in this new, safe territory. It is a disorienting realization when you discover that you don't actually know who you are without your defense mechanisms. When you stop reacting to past hurts, there is a sudden lull in your internal world. You might stand in your living room or walk down the street feeling lost, asking yourself what you are supposed to be doing if you aren't actively trying to fix a crisis, repair a situation, or guard your heart. When you put down a map made of pain, it takes time to draw a new one made of trust, curiosity, and calm. Standing at the crossroads without a direction isn't a sign that you have lost your way. It is simply the moment where you get to decide where you actually want to go, rather than where your past was forcing you to run. Most of us spent years mistaking constant stress for what it meant to truly be alive. We became so accustomed to the high volume of emotional noise that we began associating caring about something with worrying endlessly about it. We grew up believing that if our hearts weren't racing, if our minds weren't constantly solving a puzzle, or if our lives weren't filled with some kind of dramatic narrative, then something must be wrong. In that state of mind, genuine inner peace doesn't feel like a relief. It feels like boredom, or worse, like the calm right before another storm hits. When you finally begin to heal, the sudden absence of conflict can feel shockingly, uncomfortably unfamiliar. You might find yourself sitting on the couch on a quiet Sunday afternoon, with no urgent crisis waiting to be solved, and no emotional fire to put out. The room around you is quiet. The day is open, and there is nothing pulling at your attention. But instead of settling into a feeling of deep relaxation, a sudden wave of discomfort washes over you. Your chest tightens slightly. Your thoughts start racing to find a problem, and you feel an inexplicable urge to get up and fix something, check something, or start an argument just to break the quiet. Your nervous system has spent so long adapted to noise, hypervigilance, and tension, that stillness feels like a trap. It is looking for the hidden danger, because for most of your life, quiet moments were usually interrupted by sudden pain or unexpected disappointment. When you have been trained to expect chaos, tranquility feels like an illusion, a temporary trick that you shouldn't trust. You wait for the other shoe to drop, holding your breath in a room that is completely safe. The emptiness you feel in these quiet moments is not a void where something vital is missing. It is not a sign that your life has lost its meaning or that you are failing to live fully. It is simply the unfamiliar sound of peace, and peace takes time, patience, and practice to get used to. It requires teaching your mind and body that stillness is no longer a warning sign of incoming trouble. When you sit in an empty space where chaos used to live, you are learning a brand new language. It is the language of ease, where you don't have to earn your right to rest, and where you don't have to keep your guard up to stay safe. Moving into this quiet territory means allowing yourself to breathe without waiting for an explosion. It means trusting that when nothing is happening around you, it isn't a blank void. It is a sanctuary. Slowly, day by day, that hollow, unsettling quiet begins to soften. What once felt like an empty, nervous space eventually becomes the gentle, restful home you have been searching for all along. We build so much of our identity around the heavy things that broke us in the past. Without even realizing it, we introduce ourselves to the world through our struggles, our deepest regrets, our past mistakes, and the difficult chapters we barely managed to survive. We carry these experiences like an old armor, wrapping ourselves tightly in the narrative of what happened to us. It becomes deeply comfortable, almost reassuring, to think of ourselves strictly as the fighter, the eternal survivor, the misunderstood one, or the person who always has to carry the heavy emotional load for everyone else. That old story, as painful as it might be, offers a profound sense of familiarity. It gives you a clear role to play in your own life and in your relationships. When you view yourself entirely through the lens of what was taken from you or how you were hurt, you always know what your lines are, how to react, and what to expect. The struggle becomes a warm, familiar jacket that you wear every single day, even when the weather outside has long since changed. But as the true work of healing takes root deep inside your heart, those old labels slowly begin to lose their grip. They start to feel tight, suffocating, and uncomfortably outdated. You suddenly reach a point in your journey where you realize you no longer have the desire to spend every single conversation retelling the story of what went wrong. You grow tired of identifying only with your wounds, tired of using past heartbreaks to explain why you cannot move forward, and tired of letting old, painful chapters dictate how you act today. You begin to crave something quieter, something lighter, and something entirely unwritten. As Carl Jung famously observed, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. It is one of the most liberating truths you will ever encounter, yet it carries a subtle, quiet terror. Choosing what to become means that you must first be willing to lay down the story that used to define you. It means standing completely still in that brief, disorienting pause where the old narrative has officially ended, but the new one hasn't been written yet. That pause is precisely where the feeling of emptiness lives. When you stop repeating the old tales of betrayal, disappointment, or struggle, there is a sudden, vast silence in your mind. You look at your reflections, your daily conversations, and your choices, and you wonder, if I am no longer defined by my past pain, then who am I right now? If I don't have to spend all my energy defending myself or surviving, what do I actually want to do with my life? Standing in that blank space can make you feel lost, as if you have dropped your script in the middle of a play. You might catch yourself missing the old story simply because it gave you something to hold on to. But that empty space isn't a void of loss. It is the open canvas of your freedom. Letting go of an old story does not mean pretending that your past never happened, nor does it mean minimizing the very real scars you bear. It simply means deciding that your history is a chapter of your journey, not the whole book. It is the brave act of saying, that is where I was, but it is not where I am staying. When you release the old narrative, the quiet space that remains isn't empty. It is just waiting for you to pick up the pen and write what comes next with gentle, unhurried hands. Think about what happens when you decide to clear out an old, crowded storage room or closet that has been packed tightly with boxes for years. You spend hours going through dust-covered papers, broken pieces of furniture, forgotten keepsakes, and heavy items you held on to just in case you might need them someday. You sort through the pile, decide what no longer serves a purpose, and carry the last box out to the curb. When you step back inside and look at the room, the transformation is immediate, but it isn't automatically warm or cozy. The space looks huge, bright, and completely bare. The sunlight hits corners that haven't seen light in a decade, exposing every scratch on the floor and every patch of faded paint on the walls. When you take a breath or speak out loud, you might even hear an unsettling echo bouncing off the empty surfaces. There is nowhere to hide, no clutter to distract your eyes, and no familiar piles to make the room feel small and full. Healing does the exact same thing to your internal world. It is an intense, deliberate act of emotional clearing. For years, you packed your inner closet with defensive reactions, toxic habits, heavy grudges, outdated coping mechanisms, and walls you built to keep yourself from getting hurt again. You held on to those emotional boxes because at one point in your life, they kept you safe. They gave you something to hide behind when the world felt too overwhelming. When you do the difficult work of sorting through those internal boxes, when you release the resentment, unlearn the self-defeating habits, and stop carrying the emotional baggage that was never yours to hold, you step back into your own inner landscape. And just like that bare storage room, your mind feels suddenly vast, quiet, and shockingly clear. That sudden emptiness can feel frightening. You are so used to the crowded feeling of being full of anxiety, overthinking, and protection that standing in an open, unburdened room feels like you have lost a part of yourself. You might look around your emotional life and wonder why you feel so bare, or why the quiet inside your head feels almost cold. You might even feel a sudden, strange temptation to drag the old boxes back inside, simply because an empty room feels so unfamiliar and exposed. It is vital to remind yourself in those moments that an empty room isn't broken. The echo you hear is not a sign of damage. It is simply proof that the clutter is finally gone. The vast space you are standing in is not a void that needs to be rushed into with frantic noise or new distractions. It is simply a clean, open sanctuary waiting for you to decide, with gentle intention, what truly deserves to be brought back inside. You get to choose what fills your heart now, and you can take all the time you need to make it feel like home. When you go through a deep transformation from the inside out, the changes eventually ripple into the smallest, quietest corners of your daily life. Your daily routines, habits, and rhythms suddenly begin to look and feel entirely different. In the past, your days were likely anchored by subtle survival mechanisms. You might have spent every evening replaying conversations in your head, analyzing every tone, gesture, or long pause, trying to figure out if you said something wrong or if someone was upset with you. Your nervous energy had a set track to run on. It kept you busy, alert, and constantly engaged, even if it exhausted you. Now, as healing settles in, that old compulsion loses its power. You sit down at the end of the day, and when you try to overthink or run through those familiar loops, the energy just isn't there anymore. The emotional engine that powered your anxiety has run out of fuel. Out of sheer habit, you might reach for your phone, scrolling aimlessly through feeds, looking for a quick distraction, a burst of news, or a background noise to fill the silence. You look for something, anything, to absorb the restless energy that used to go into worrying, protecting yourself, or managing emotional chaos. But after a few minutes, you put the screen down, feeling oddly unsatisfied and detached. The old habits that used to absorb your nervous energy simply don't work the way they used to, yet you haven't fully built the new, grounding rituals that feel truly meaningful to you. This creates a strange, temporary gap in your day. It is the space between who you used to be and who you are becoming. Suddenly, you have hours in your evening or moments in your morning that feel completely unoccupied. There are no emotional fires to put out, no past mistakes to endlessly unpack, and no urgent need to keep your guard up. To your mind, this gap can easily feel like a hollow void or a deep, unsettling emptiness. You might feel floating or aimless, wondering why you feel so out of sync when nothing is explicitly wrong. You might feel a sudden loss of momentum, mistaking the drop in anxiety for a loss of purpose. It is so important to recognize that this temporary emptiness is not a decline. It is actually the very beginning of intentional living. You are unlearning years of automated stress responses. When the old rhythms fall away, the silence left behind feels large and unfamiliar, simply because it is unoccupied. You do not need to rush to fill this time with productivity, busyness, or shallow distractions just to escape the quiet. Allow your daily pace to slow down. Let your mornings be simple. Let your evenings be unhurried. And give your nervous system permission to adjust to a rhythm that isn't driven by urgency. This quiet gap in your day is not a void to be feared. It is the open space where real, peaceful routines finally have room to take root. Before the pain, before the heavy burdens, and before you had to figure out how to build thick walls just to protect your heart, there was a simpler, softer version of you. That version of you had curious interests, simple, everyday joys, and moments that made you laugh completely from the stomach without thinking twice. You used to get lost in small hobbies, wander around with an open mind, and feel a natural, quiet excitement about the world. You didn't double-check every word you said, and you didn't look over your shoulder, waiting for something to go wrong. But when you spend years living in survival mode, those light, creative, and gentle parts of you get tucked away. You lock them in a safe drawer deep inside yourself because survival demands all your attention. When you are busy trying to navigate emotional storms, handle constant stress, or protect yourself from getting hurt, there is simply no energy left over for playfulness, curiosity, or light-hearted dreams. Staying safe becomes your only full-time job, and the joyful pieces of your spirit are set aside just so you can get through the day. Once that survival phase finally ends and the constant emergency fades away, you find yourself standing in the quiet. You realize it is finally safe enough to go back and reopen that drawer. But when you reach inside, the process can feel surprisingly strange, awkward, and even a little heartbreaking. You sit down and try to ask yourself basic questions. What do I actually enjoy doing when nobody is watching? What brings me quiet comfort? What makes me feel like myself? And often, the response inside your mind is total silence. When you haven't had the freedom to choose what you want in a very long time, stepping back into your own likes and passions feels like visiting an old childhood room where everything is covered in dust. You might try to pick up an old hobby you used to love, maybe sitting down with a book, listening to music, sketching, or spending time in nature, and feel an unsettling wave of emotional emptiness instead of instant joy. You might feel disconnected from the things that once brought you comfort, wondering why the key no longer fits the lock the way it used to. It is easy to mistake that emotional distance for permanent loss, making you worry that the happiest, lightest parts of who you were are gone forever. That hollow feeling in the middle of trying to reconnect with yourself is not a sign that those gentle parts of you are dead. It is simply the time it takes for a dormant seed to wake up after a long, cold winter. You cannot expect to jump straight from years of self-defense back into effortless joy without a period of quiet adjustment. Rebuilding your life after healing is not about magically transforming into a completely different person. It is about patiently remembering the gentle pieces of yourself you had to set aside just to survive. Giving yourself permission to reconnect with who you were means moving slowly without placing pressure on the outcome. It means reaching into that old drawer with kindness, dusting off those forgotten pieces one by one, and letting yourself get acquainted with them all over again at your own natural pace. When the busy work of healing slows down and the intense emotional fires are finally put out, you are left with something you might not have anticipated: total, unvarnished stillness. The loud arguments have faded, the urgent problems are solved, and the heavy, clouding emotions that used to take up all your energy have cleared away. You are finally forced to sit with yourself without any buffers, distractions, or temporary fixes. This quiet space is often the exact moment where the deeper, darker, and more uncomfortable parts of your internal truth begin to surface. For years, the constant survival mode allowed you to ignore what was lurking beneath the surface. You were far too busy reacting to external chaos, managing other people's expectations, or simply keeping your head above water to notice the quiet grief, the buried resentment, or the deep insecurities resting at the bottom of your heart. When the external noise drops to zero, those long-buried feelings finally find room to speak. You sit in a quiet room, and instead of feeling instant bliss, you might feel a sudden, strange ache. You might notice feelings of jealousy, old bitterness, fear of the future, or a quiet guilt over past choices. Parts of yourself that you would much rather pretend don't exist. It is so easy in these moments to feel overwhelmed, to panic and to believe that the emptiness inside you is proof that you haven't actually made any real progress at all. Carl Jung described this exact stage of personal transformation when he noted, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Making the darkness conscious sounds intense, but in truth, it is one of the quietest, most gentle steps you will ever take. Facing your inner emptiness doesn't mean waging a new war against yourself or analyzing your flaws until you feel small. It simply means acknowledging that the uncomfortable quiet isn't something you need to run away from. It means sitting down on the floor of your own mind and admitting, "I am afraid. I carry old regrets. I don't have everything figured out, and that is okay." The shadow is not a monster hiding inside you. It is simply every part of your story that was forced into hiding because it felt too unsafe or unacceptable to look at in the past. It contains the anger you weren't allowed to express, the vulnerability you had to suppress to look strong, and the grief you never had time to properly weep over. When you sit in the quiet without judgment, you are finally giving those orphaned pieces of yourself a safe place to rest. It takes immense emotional courage to look at your own shadow with kindness instead of fear. When you stop labeling your quiet sadness or your inner awkwardness as bad or broken, the heavy emptiness begins to change its nature. You begin to recognize that these quiet, hidden parts are simply pieces of your whole picture. Sitting with your shadow in the silence is not a punishment. It is the sacred, necessary threshold where you move from surviving life to truly knowing yourself. The emptiness you feel isn't a void that is trying to consume you. It is simply the wide, open space where you finally invite every single part of who you are to come back home. It is terrifyingly easy to live your entire life reacting to everyone else's needs, moods, and expectations. Without even realizing it, you gradually mold yourself into the reliable friend, the smooth problem solver, or the quiet peacekeeper who ensures everyone around you feels comfortable, validated, and safe. You become an expert at reading the energy of a room, anticipating what others want before they even ask, and shrinking your own desires to avoid causing friction or stepping on anyone's toes. For years, your inner world was entirely occupied by other people. You filled your time, your emotional energy, and your thoughts with their problems, their opinions, and their demands. You carried their burdens as if they were your own, mistaking people-pleasing for love and self-sacrifice for worthiness. Then, as you begin to heal, something profound shifts inside you. You start setting firm boundaries. You stop jumping to fix every situation. You stop offering automatic apologies for simply existing. And you step back from taking on emotional weight that was never yours to carry in the first place. You stop trying to manage how other people feel about you. When you step back from those old, exhausting roles, a sudden, weightless lightness appears. The constant pressure lifts off your shoulders, but in its place, a strange new hollow feeling emerges. You look at your daily life and realize just how much space you used to yield to everyone else, and how little room you left for yourself. That initial hollow feeling can be deeply unsettling. When you are so accustomed to being full of other people's emotions, expectations, and demands, standing in your own clean, quiet space feels like being lost in a vast, empty room. You might catch yourself feeling guilty for not being busy fixing someone else's problem. You might feel a lingering anxiety, wondering if setting boundaries makes you selfish, or if stepping back means you will be left behind entirely. This is the quiet hurdle where many people turn back, mistaking the empty room for loneliness or isolation. But that emptiness is not a void of loss. It is the wide, open territory of your own life that you are finally reclaiming. Learning to occupy your own space means learning how to fill that territory with your own presence. It is asking yourself simple, quiet questions that you may have ignored for years. What pace do I actually want to live at today? What do I feel like saying when I don't have to agree with everyone else? What does my body need right now? It means allowing yourself to take up room without apologizing. It means letting your voice sit in a conversation without softening your truth just to keep the peace. It means making decisions based on your own internal compass, rather than trying to manage the reactions of those around you. Occupying your own space is not a loud or aggressive act. It is one of the quietest, most grounded parts of the entire healing journey. It is the brave decision to step back into your own life, sit down in the center of your own heart, and realize that you are allowed to be here, fully, completely, and without needing anyone else's permission to exist. It is terrifyingly easy to live your entire life reacting to everyone else's needs, moods, and expectations. Without even realizing it, you gradually mold yourself into the reliable friend, the smooth problem solver, or the quiet peacekeeper who ensures everyone around you feels comfortable, validated, and safe. You become an expert at reading the energy of a room, anticipating what others want before they even ask, and shrinking your own desires to avoid causing friction or stepping on anyone's toes. For years, your inner world was entirely occupied by other people. You filled your time, your emotional energy, and your thoughts with their problems, their opinions, and their demands. You carried their burdens as if they were your own, mistaking people-pleasing for love and self-sacrifice for worthiness. Then, as you begin to heal, something profound shifts inside you. You start setting firm boundaries. You stop jumping to fix every situation. You stop offering automatic apologies for simply existing. And you step back from taking on emotional weight that was never yours to carry in the first place. You stop trying to manage how other people feel about you. When you step back from those old, exhausting roles, a sudden, weightless lightness appears. The constant pressure lifts off your shoulders, but in its place, a strange new hollow feeling emerges. You look at your daily life and realize just how much space you used to yield to everyone else and how little room you left for yourself. That initial hollow feeling can be deeply unsettling. When you are so accustomed to being full of other people's emotions, expectations, and demands, standing in your own clean, quiet space feels like being lost in a vast, empty room. You might catch yourself feeling guilty for not being busy fixing someone else's problem. You might feel a lingering anxiety, wondering if setting boundaries makes you selfish, or if stepping back means you will be left behind entirely. This is the quiet hurdle where many people turn back, mistaking the empty room for loneliness or isolation. But that emptiness is not a void of loss. It is the wide, open territory of your own life that you are finally reclaiming. Learning to occupy your own space means learning how to fill that territory with your own presence. It is asking yourself simple, quiet questions that you may have ignored for years. What pace do I actually want to live at today? What do I feel like saying when I don't have to agree with everyone else? What does my body need right now? It means allowing yourself to take up room without apologizing. It means letting your voice sit in a conversation without softening your truth just to keep the peace. It means making decisions based on your own internal compass, rather than trying to manage the reactions of those around you. Occupying your own space is not a loud or aggressive act. It is one of the quietest, most grounded parts of the entire healing journey. It is the brave decision to step back into your own life, sit down in the center of your own heart, and realize that you are allowed to be here, fully, completely, and without needing anyone else's permission to exist. The emptiness you feel right now is not the cold, bitter end of your story. It is the warm, clean surface where your next chapter finally gets written. For so long, your life was like an overcrowded notebook, filled to the very margins with chaos, old survival strategies, endless worries, and the emotional weight of everything you had to endure just to make it through the day. You didn't have room to dream, to invent, or to simply enjoy the act of living, because every single inch of your mental and emotional bandwidth was taken up by the raw effort of staying afloat. Now, through the slow, brave, and painstaking process of healing, all of those cluttered pages have been gently turned. The heavy stories have found their end. And as you look down at where you are standing right now, you are met with a vast, completely blank page. At first, that blank space can feel terrifying. When you are used to the noise, the clutter, and the constant movement, standing before an empty horizon can make you feel lost, floating, or even hollow inside. You might look at the quiet around you and wonder if you lost something vital along the way, or if the absence of pain has somehow left you with nothing at all. You might feel an intense, nervous urge to rush out and fill that blank page immediately, grabbing on to any old distraction, any familiar stress, or any quick answer, just to escape the uncomfortable weight of the unknown. But a seed does not grow in a crowded, concrete room packed tightly with old debris. It requires soft, open earth, gentle sunlight, and space to stretch its hidden roots outward. It needs the quiet dark of the soil before it can ever break through the surface into something beautiful. When you look at the quiet, still moments in your life right now, try with all your heart not to see them as a terrifying void that needs to be filled. Try not to mistake the peace you fought for as a sign that you are stagnant or falling behind. Give yourself explicit permission to simply sit in this open space. Let yourself breathe deeply without needing to justify your rest. Move slowly through your days without rushing to figure out every detail of who you are going to be tomorrow, next month, or 10 years from now. You don't need to force the future to arrive all at once. You don't need to hurry your heart into feeling passionate, joyful, or completely complete before it is ready. Creation does not happen through force. It happens through patience, softness, and presence. This quiet gap is the room you made for yourself. It is the sanctuary you carved out of your past struggles. Every piece of noise you let go of, every boundary you set, and every old story you put down was done so that you could finally have this moment of stillness. Trust that you are not losing your way. Trust that the empty room in your heart is not a sign of brokenness, but a sign of readiness. You have simply cleared the floor, opened the windows, and let the stale air out. Now, in the quiet that remains, real, grounded, and lasting peace can finally make itself at home, and from this clean, open ground, the truest version of your life will slowly, gently begin to grow. If you have made it to the end of this journey, take a long, slow breath and let your shoulders drop. For such a long time, you believed that the goal of healing was to reach a state of constant joy, endless energy, and absolute certainty. You thought that as you did the heavy work of untangling your past, you would step into a life that felt instantly full, bright, and triumphant. But as we have explored together, true healing often brings something far quieter and much more surprising, a vast, unhurried stillness. It leaves you standing in an empty room where the loud, chaotic survival mechanisms of your past used to live. It is completely natural to feel unsettled by that quiet. When you are so used to carrying a heavy load, your hands feel strangely lost when they are finally empty. When your nervous system has been trained to expect constant emergencies, peace can feel like a trap, and stillness can feel like an uncomfortable void. You might catch yourself wondering if you did something wrong, or if you somehow lost your way, simply because you aren't rushing toward the next fire to put out. I want to remind you, gently and clearly, that the emptiness you feel right now is not a sign of failure. It is not a void where something essential is missing, nor is it proof that you are broken. That emptiness is simply the clean slate you fought so hard to create. It is the quiet soil after the storm. The bare space after a crowded closet is finally cleared out. And the open road that appears when you finally lay down a map made of past pain. You do not need to rush to fill this space with new worries, endless busyness, or shallow distractions just to prove you are moving forward. You are allowed to sit in the quiet. You are allowed to rest in the open territory of your own life. You are allowed to take all the time you need to get used to the sound of peace. As we close this chapter together, I invite you to anchor yourself in this moment and claim the space you have worked so hard to create. Leave a comment below with this simple, grounded affirmation. I honor the quiet space within me, and I trust what is taking root. Type those words out. Let them sit in your mind, and let your heart feel their truth. Let it be a gentle promise to yourself that you will no longer fear the stillness. You have cleared the heavy debris of your past, unlearned the habits that kept you small, and stepped back into your own life. The empty room before you isn't a void. It is your clean, quiet home, waiting for you to decide what comes next at your own natural, gentle pace. Thank you for walking this path with me, for being brave enough to sit in the quiet, and for allowing your story the space it needs to truly begin.